Welcome, friends. Today we dive into one of the most chilling, untold stories of the Star Wars galaxy, the lives of the millions who built the Death Star, the Empire's ultimate weapon of terror. This is not a story about stormtroopers or officers, or the grand vision of Tarkin and Vader. This is a story about you, a civilian engineer forcibly conscripted to construct a moon-sized battle station in secret, forbidden from leaving, forbidden from speaking about what you're building, working 16-hour shifts in lethal conditions where one mistake means death by decompression, radiation, or execution for suspected sabotage. This is a story about the Wookiee slaves dragging massive girders in chains without protective gear, about the hundreds who died weekly in industrial accidents and whose bodies were simply jettisoned into space, about the impossible deadlines that forced workers to cut safety measures until catastrophic explosions became routine, about living inside a weapons project for years without knowing its true purpose until the day you watched through a monitor as your creation vaporized Alderaan and 2 billion innocent lives in seconds. This is a story about what it means to be forced to build an instrument of genocide, to survive long enough to see it used, and then to die when rebel fighters exploit the very design flaw you weren't allowed to fix because questioning orders meant execution. Don't forget to subscribe to Imperial Chronicles and hit the notification bell. These forgotten voices need to be heard. Now close your eyes and imagine. This is your story. You stand in the cramped personnel transport bay on Corellia, your home world, surrounded by 300 other beings. Humans, Duros, Sulostans, a few Twi'leks, all clutching the same crisp white datapad that arrived at your residence 2 weeks ago, bearing the unmistakable seal of the Galactic Empire. The seal is embossed in black and silver, the Imperial cog surrounded by text in severe Arabic script that reads, Imperial Conscription Notice, Mandatory Service Assignment. You are Jaren Cross, 38 years old, a structural engineer who has spent the last 15 years designing load-bearing frameworks for orbital stations above Corellia's industrial shipyards. And until this moment, you believed your life was stable, predictable, safe. Your wife Mira and daughter Sarah, just 10 years old with her mother's dark eyes and your stubborn chin, stood on the platform outside the security checkpoint, crying as stormtroopers in white plastoid armor refused to let them pass. And the last image you have of them is Sarah's small hand waving goodbye through the transparasteel barrier, her face wet with tears you could not wipe away. The conscription notice gave you 72 hours to report. No explanation of the assignment, no duration specified, just coordinates for this embarkation facility and a single line of text that made your blood run cold. Failure to comply will result in arrest and execution of immediate family members for obstruction of Imperial operations. You complied, of course. Everyone complied. The Empire does not make requests. It issues commands backed by the implicit threat of overwhelming violence, and you have seen enough HoloNet broadcasts of public executions on worlds that resisted to know that defiance is not an option for beings who value the lives of those they love. So you packed a single duffel bag with clothes, a hollow image of your family, your tools, a hydro spanner, a fusion cutter, a datapad loaded with structural engineering software, and reported to the facility where Imperial logistics personnel scanned your identification, checked your name against a massive database, and directed you to this bay with curt efficiency and no answers to your questions. The transport is a Theta-class barge, a utilitarian vessel designed to move cargo and personnel in bulk with no consideration for comfort. The interior is all bare durasteel walls and exposed conduit, with fold-down seats made of hard plasteel that dig into your back and legs, even through your work coveralls. The air smells of recycled atmosphere, machine oil, and fear, the sharp, acrid scent of sweat from 300 beings who do not know where they are going or why they have been taken from their lives. You sit between a middle-aged Celestin whose jowls quiver with anxiety and a young human woman, barely 20, who stares straight ahead with a blank expression of shock. No one speaks much. What is there to say? The stormtroopers standing at the exits with E-11 blaster rifles discourage conversation anyway, their helmets turning to scan the crowd with the mindless vigilance of droids. Though you know there are humans inside those suits, beings who chose to serve the Empire and now enforce its will without question or mercy. The engines roar to life, a deep thrumming that vibrates through the deck plates and into your bones, and the transport lifts off. Through the small viewports along the hull, you watch Corellia fall away, the sprawling industrial cities, the green and blue continents, the orbital shipyards where you spent so many years of your life, all shrinking to a marble, then a dot, then disappearing entirely as the ship makes the jump to hyperspace. The blue-white tunnel of faster-than-light travel fills the viewports, and you lean back against the uncomfortable seat and close your eyes, trying not to think about what awaits at the end of this journey. The trip lasts 7 standard days. You are fed twice daily from automated dispensers that provide gray protein paste in sealed pouches and tepid water that tastes of metal. Sleeping is done in shifts in the same seats, your head lolling forward or sideways, neck cramping painfully. The refreshers are communal and disgusting, overused by too many beings and cleaned too infrequently, and you avoid them as much as possible, enduring the discomfort rather than subjecting yourself to the squalor. On the 7th day, the ship drops from hyperspace, and through the viewports you see your destination. At first you think it is a moon, a massive spherical object hanging in the black void of space, its surface gray and pitted with geometric patterns. But as the transport draws closer, the scale becomes apparent, and you realize with growing horror that this is not a natural satellite but a construction, an artificial structure the size of a small moon, its surface covered with trenches and towers, and the distinctive geometric panels of durasteel plating. You have worked on orbital stations for 15 years, some of them kilometers in diameter, and you thought you understood the scale of space construction, but this defies comprehension. The sphere must be over 160 kilometers in diameter, its mass incomprehensible, its purpose unknowable, though your engineer's mind recoils from the implications of building something this massive in secret. The transport approaches what appears to be a construction zone on the station's equator, a section where the outer hull is incomplete, revealing the skeletal framework beneath, massive durasteel girders each the size of a star destroyer, crisscrossing in complex geometric patterns. Hundreds of smaller vessels swarm around the construction site like insects around a carcass. Cargo haulers, welding platforms, personnel transports identical to yours. And everywhere you look, you see beings working. Tiny figures in EV suits floating in the vacuum, their welding torches creating brilliant points of light against the darkness, or suspended on repulsor platforms moving massive sections of hull plating. Into position. The sheer scale of the labor force is staggering. There must be tens of thousands of workers visible just in this one section, and this is clearly only a fraction of the total construction effort. The transport docks at a receiving station, a temporary structure of modular hab units and docking clamps bolted to the incomplete superstructure. The rear ramp lowers with a hiss of hydraulics, and stormtroopers herd you and the other conscripts out into a pressurized embarkation bay where the air is cold enough to see your breath and smells of welding flux and industrial solvents. An Imperial officer, a man in his 40s with the gray-green uniform of the engineering corps and the insignia of a commander, stands on a raised platform addressing the arriving workers through a voice amplifier that makes his words echo harshly off the metal walls. You have been selected for service on Project Stardust, the Empire's most critical military construction initiative. This facility is classified at the highest level of Imperial secrecy. Any attempt to communicate details of this project to unauthorized persons will result in immediate execution. Your service commitment is 20 years, non-negotiable, with no possibility of early termination, except by death or completion of the project. Communication with family or associates off-station is restricted to one censored message per month, transmitted via Imperial Security Bureau monitoring. Your living quarters, work assignments, and all other aspects of your existence for the duration of your service are now under Imperial jurisdiction. Failure to comply with directives will be met with punishment up to and including summary execution. Welcome to the Death Star. Death Star. The name lands in your consciousness like a physical blow, and around you, beings murmur in shock and fear. The officer continues speaking, explaining the basic structure of life on the station, the work rotations, the living arrangements, the chain of command. But you barely hear him because your mind is reeling from the implications. A battle station the size of a moon, 20 years of forced labor, no escape. Your wife and daughter will grow old without you. Sarah will be 30 before you see her again if you survive this. And the statistical likelihood of survival on a project of this magnitude with this level of secrecy is, you force yourself not to calculate it because the number would be too terrible to bear. They assign you to HAB Module 73, a cylindrical structure 300 meters long and 50 wide, welded to the outer framework of the station's superstructure in Sector 8-4-12. The module houses 400 workers, engineers, welders, construction droids, and general laborers. The interior is divided into 2 levels. The lower level for bunks and the upper level for common facilities, including refreshers, a commissary, and a small recreation room with a single hollow projector unit that receives only Imperial propaganda broadcasts. Your bunk is on the lower level, a metal frame welded to a wall in a room that contains 99 other bunks arranged in double tiers. The bunk is 1.8 meters long and 0.9 meters wide, barely large enough for your body, with a thin foam mattress covered in plastoid sheeting and a single thermal blanket. There are no privacy screens, no personal storage beyond a small locker at the foot of each bunk. The being in the bunk above yours is a Duro named Kent Gravin, a plasma systems engineer who was conscripted from his job on a freighter construction facility in the Duro system. He has the bulbous red eyes and lipless mouth characteristic of his species, and when he speaks, his basic is accented but clear. "How long have you been here?" you ask, stowing your duffel in the locker. 4 months, Kent replies, his voice tired. Lost track of days after the first month. They work us in shifts, 16 hours on, 8 hours off, rotating constantly so you never develop a normal sleep cycle. By the 2nd month, your body doesn't know if it's day or night. By the 4th, you stop caring. What exactly are we building? Kent's expression, difficult to read on a Duro's alien features, seems to darken. You heard the commander, the Death Star, a mobile battle station with a super laser capable of destroying planets. We're constructing the framework and outer hull. Other teams handle the weapons systems, the reactor core, the hyperdrive arrays. Most of us will never see those sections. They're restricted to higher clearance levels. Planets, you repeat, the word feeling absurd in your mouth. You mean like asteroids? Large ships? No. Planets. Inhabited worlds. The super laser is being designed to crack a planet's core and cause complete fragmentation. Total annihilation of everything on the surface and in orbit. Kent's voice drops to a whisper. I've seen the energy requirements in the schematics I helped design. The power output needed could only have one purpose. This thing is meant to inspire terror, not to fight conventional battles. One shot, one world gone, billions dead, the ultimate weapon of control. You sit on your bunk, the thin mattress compressing under your weight, and try to process this information. Your hands are shaking. You clasp them together to stop the tremor. And we're building it. We're helping create something that will be used to commit genocide. We don't have a choice, Kent says quietly. Refuse to work, and they execute you. Sabotage your assignment, and they execute you plus 10 random workers as collective punishment. Try to escape, and they hunt down your family back home and execute them on HoloNet broadcast as an example. I saw it happen to a welder from Fondor who tried to steal a shuttle. They didn't just kill him, they broadcast the execution of his wife and 3 children, made all the workers on his shift watch. The Empire doesn't bluff, Cross. We're prisoners here, and our labor is compulsory. Morality is a luxury we can't afford. The first shift begins 6 hours after arrival, barely enough time to eat a meal of reconstituted protein porridge from the commissary, and attempt a few hours of fitful sleep on the uncomfortable bunk. The wake-up alarm is a blaring klaxon that reverberates through the HAB module, jolting you from dreams of home into the harsh reality of fluorescent lighting and the sounds of 400 beings groaning and cursing as they drag themselves from their bunks. You dress in the provided work suit, a heavy coverall of insulated synth mesh with built-in life support connections and magnetic boots for zero-gravity work. The suit is used, stained with old grease and sweat from previous wearers, and smells of industrial chemicals and fear. Over this you don the exo-activity suit for vacuum work. A bulky EVA unit with an armored torso shell, a helmet with a narrow faceplate, oxygen recyclers on the back, and maneuvering thrusters at the waist and shoulders. The suit is old, patched in a dozen places with sealant that has hardened to a different texture than the original material. And when you activate the helmet HUD, the display flickers ominously before stabilizing. Your assignment is Exterior Hull Sector 47 Alpha, a section of the station's outer sphere where massive durasteel plates must be welded into position and secured with magnetic clamps and fusion welds that will hold against the stress of hyperspace travel and potential weapons fire. You are part of a crew of 30 engineers and 200 laborers, overseen by an Imperial supervisor named Lieutenant Thal Jorse, a human male in his 30s with a scar across his left cheek and eyes like chips of ice. Jorse briefs the crew in a pressurized assembly chamber before the shift begins, his voice harsh and brooking no questions. Your quota for this shift is 18 hull plates, each plate measuring 100 meters by 100 meters, weighing approximately 800 metric tons. Plates will be positioned by crane droids and secured by your welding teams. Structural integrity must meet Imperial Navy specifications with 0 defects. Any plate that fails inspection will be redone, and the time lost will be added to your shift. Work-related injuries are your own responsibility. Medical droids are available at the Sector 8 station, but treatment time comes out of your rest period. Deaths will be logged and replacements assigned. You have 16 hours. Begin. The work is brutal beyond anything you have experienced in your career. In the vacuum of space, tethered to the station's skeletal framework by magnetic boots and safety cables, you direct teams of welders as they fuse durasteel plates along seams that must be perfect to prevent catastrophic decompression when the station is pressurized. The welding torches burn at temperatures exceeding 2,000 degrees, their brilliant blue-white light visible even through the darkened faceplate of your helmet, and the heat radiates through your suit despite its insulation, making you sweat profusely in the confined space until your coverall is soaked and chafing against your skin. The cold is equally punishing. The sections of the station in shadow, blocked from the distant sun by the bulk of the superstructure, drop to temperatures below -40 degrees Celsius, and despite the suit's heating elements, your fingers and Toes go numb, losing dexterity until you are fumbling with tools and making mistakes that cost time. The scale of the construction is nightmarish. Each hull plate weighs as much as a small starship, and positioning them requires crane droids operating with millimeter precision, while dozens of workers guide them into place with repulsor poles and magnetic grapples. One plate slips during installation on your second shift, its magnetic clamps failing, and the massive slab of durasteel swings free, its edge catching a welder who is secured to the framework below. You watch in horror through your faceplate as the plate shears the worker's safety cable and crushes him against a support girder, the impact so violent that even in vacuum you can see the explosion of blood and the deformation of his EV suit as his body is pulped. The plate is secured eventually. The worker's remains peeled off the girder and bagged for disposal, and work continues without pause. The entire incident takes 7 minutes. No one speaks about it. The worker's name is never mentioned. He becomes a statistic, one more entry in a ledger of acceptable losses. You see Wookiees, dozens of them, enslaved beings from the forest world of Kashyyyk, working in the most dangerous sections of the construction without proper protective equipment. They wear simple pressure suits with minimal radiation shielding, and their massive furred bodies are visible through the transparent faceplates as they haul enormous durasteel beams into position using their immense strength. The Wookiees are chained together in work gangs of 10, their movements coordinated by shock collars that Imperial overseers trigger remotely when the aliens move too slowly or fail to follow barked commands. You witness an overseer, a sneering human sergeant with a shock baton, beat a Wookiee who stumbled under the weight of a beam, the electroshock weapon crackling against the alien suit, and the Wookiee's roars of pain and rage transmit over the work. Channel frequency, a sound of pure anguish that makes you want to intervene but you do not, because intervening means death, and death means your family suffers. This is the calculus of survival on the Death Star. Swallow your humanity or be destroyed. Weeks blur into months. Your body adapts to the punishing routine. 16-hour shifts followed by 8 hours of rest that is never restful. Your muscles constantly aching, your hands developing calluses on top of calluses, your back a permanent knot of pain from the weight of the EVA suit and the awkward positions required for welding in zero gravity. You lose weight despite eating every meal provided in the commissary, your body consuming itself for energy that the meager rations cannot replenish. The food is tasteless sludge dispensed from automated systems, protein paste synthesized from algae and recycled organic waste, carbohydrate blocks that have the texture of damp cardboard, vitamin supplements in pill form that leave a chemical aftertaste in your mouth for hours. You eat because your body demands fuel, not because anything has flavor or provides satisfaction. Sleep is shallow and plagued by nightmares. Dreams of falling into the void, of your daughter calling for you from a planet that explodes in green fire, of being crushed between hull plates while your crewmates ignore your screams. The casualty rate is staggering. In your HAB modules of 400 workers, 3 die in the first month. 1 from explosive decompression when his suit's helmet seal failed, 1 from falling into a reactor shaft during internal construction work, and 1 from what is officially listed as industrial accident, but everyone knows was suicide. He detached his safety cable and pushed himself away from the station into the infinite dark of space, floating away until his oxygen ran out. The empty bunks are filled within days by new conscripts arriving on transports from across the Empire, beings pulled from their lives and dumped into this meat grinder. You learn not to make friends, not to learn names, because attachment makes the inevitable losses harder to bear. Kenneth Graven, the Duro engineer who was your first acquaintance, dies in month 3 when a crane droid malfunctioned and dropped a hull plate on the platform where he was working, crushing him and 6 others instantly. You see the body bags being loaded onto a disposal shuttle and feel nothing, your emotions cauterized by exposure to constant death. The pressure from Imperial command is relentless. Grand Moff Wilhuff. Tarkin, the skeletal figure with hollow cheeks and eyes like a predator, arrives on inspection tours once per month, stalking through the construction zones in his grey uniform with an entourage of stormtroopers and officers, observing the work with a critical gaze that misses nothing. His presence inspires terror in the supervisors, who crack down harder on the workers, demanding increased quotas, reduced rest periods, perfection in every weld and seal. During one inspection, Tarkin stops near your work crew and watches through the viewpoint of an observation blister as you direct the installation of a power conduit. His voice, cultured and cold, comes through your helmet comm. Progress on the superlaser focusing array is behind schedule. Director Krennic assures me the delays are temporary, but I do not tolerate incompetence. Increase the work tempo in this sector by 20%. If necessary, reduce rest periods to 6 hours per shift cycle. 20% increase, 6-hour rest periods. You want to scream that it is already impossible, that beings are dying from exhaustion and accidents, that there are limits to human endurance, but you say nothing because Tarkin is not interested in the limitations of labor. He's interested only in results. And if you and every other worker dies in the process of achieving those results, there are billions more beings in the Empire who can be conscripted to replace you. You see Galen Erso once, the scientist whose name is whispered among the engineering staff as the designer of the Death Star's superlaser. He is escorted through your sector by Director Orson Krennic, the white-caped officer who oversees the entire project, and a squad of death troopers in black armor. Erso looks broken, his face gaunt and pale, his eyes haunted, his movements those of a man walking through a nightmare. He does not meet the eyes of any of the workers, and you understand why. He knows what he has created, knows the purpose of this station, and the knowledge is destroying him from within. You feel a perverse kinship with him in that moment, both of you prisoners of the Empire, both complicit in building an instrument of genocide, both damned by circumstances beyond your control. Month 9 brings catastrophe to Sector November 7. A malfunction in an energy reactor causes a chain reaction explosion that kills 200 workers instantly, the blast ripping through 3 hull sections and venting atmosphere and bodies into space. You are off shift when it happens, in your HAB module, and you feel the station shudder, a vibration that travels through the superstructure like the death throes of a massive beast. The alarm klaxons wail, emergency bulkheads slam shut, and for 10 minutes no one knows if the entire sector is about to suffer catastrophic decompression. When the all-clear finally sounds, the casualty reports begin to circulate. 200 dead, another 100 injured, and the damaged sections deemed unsalvageable, to be cut away and rebuilt from scratch. The work schedule is adjusted to compensate. All crews in adjacent sectors have their shifts extended to 18 hours to make up for the lost time. 18-hour shifts, 6-hour rest periods. Your body begins to fail in measurable ways. Your hair falls out in clumps, clogging the refresher drains. Your gums bleed when you eat, vitamin deficiency causing scurvy despite the supplements. Your hands shake constantly, fine motor control degraded by fatigue and cumulative nerve damage from prolonged exposure to the electromagnetic fields of the massive reactors that power the station's construction equipment. A medical droid scans you during a mandatory health check and informs you in its emotionless, synthetic voice that you are suffering from acute radiation exposure, chronic sleep deprivation, malnutrition, and stress-induced cardiomyopathy. The droid dispenses anti-nausea medication and stimulants to keep you functional and sends you back to your shift because the Death Star does not stop for the failing health of its builders. You witness executions. A Rhodian engineer is accused of sabotage after a structural scan reveals a flaw in a weld he supervised, a flaw that could have caused decompression in a habitation sector. The engineer protests his innocence, claims the flaw was due to faulty materials provided by Imperial supply, but his protests are ignored. He is dragged to the center of the work zone, forced to kneel, and shot in the head by a stormtrooper with a blaster rifle set to maximum power. His skull explodes in a spray of green blood and brain matter that splatters across the deck, and his body is left there for an hour as a warning before being hauled away. The message is clear: perfection is mandatory, and failure equals death. The psychological toll is as destructive as the physical. Beings around you begin to crack, their sanity fragmenting under the pressure. A human welder starts talking to himself constantly, muttering conversations with people who are not there. A Sulistan grabs a vibroke knife from a tool rack and tries to attack an Imperial supervisor, screaming about freedom and resistance before being gunned down by stormtroopers. A Twi'lek female is found in the refresher with her wrists slashed, blood pooling on the floor, a suicide note written in lipstick on the mirror: "I will not build hell." You read the note before stormtroopers wipe it away and drag her body to the disposal chutes, and the words burn themselves into your memory. This station is hell, and you are one of its architects, and that knowledge is a poison that seeps deeper every day. Month 18 arrives, and with it comes news that races through the worker population like electricity. The Death Star is nearly operational. The superlaser is complete. The main reactor is online. The hyperdrive has passed its initial tests. You are transferred from external construction to internal maintenance, assigned to the technical crew responsible for maintaining the life support systems in Sector 357. A labyrinth of corridors and conduits deep in the station's superstructure. Your new quarters are even more cramped than the HAB module. A bunk in a corridor lined with dozens of others, sleeping space allocated based on shift rotations so that the same bunk is used by 3 different workers across a 24-hour period. The bunk is always warm from the previous occupant. The sheets never fully dry from their sweat. You see the superlaser for the first time during a maintenance call to inspect atmospheric processors near the weapon's focusing dish. The scale is beyond comprehension. A concave dish the size of a city, ringed with focusing arrays and energy conduits, the barrel extending back into the station for kilometers, connected to a reactor core that generates power equivalent to the output of a medium star. Standing on a catwalk overlooking the weapon, you feel vertigo and nausea, not from height, but from the realization of what this machine is capable of. One shot from this weapon, and a world dies. A world like Corellia, like Kashyyyk, like any of the thousands of inhabited planets in the galaxy. Billions of lives extinguished in seconds, and you helped build it. The first test firing is announced 3 days later. The Death Star maneuvers to a position near an uninhabited asteroid in a remote system, and all non-essential personnel are ordered to secure locations away from the weapon's firing vector. You watch on a wall-mounted monitor in a break room as the asteroid, a chunk of rock 20 kilometers in diameter, appears in the targeting reticle. The countdown begins. At 0, a beam of coherent green energy, brilliant and terrible, lances out from the superlaser's focusing dish and strikes the asteroid. The result is instantaneous. The asteroid does not shatter or explode. It simply ceases to exist, vaporized so completely that not even debris remains, just a rapidly expanding cloud of ionized particles glowing in the spectrum of electromagnetic radiation. The energy released is visible as a flash that briefly outshines the local star, and the station itself shudders from the recoil, alarms blaring as structural compensators absorb the forces. The officers and engineers in the control rooms cheer. The workers watching the monitors sit in silence, their faces pale, their eyes wide with a horrified understanding of what they have witnessed. This weapon works. It does exactly what it was designed to do, and the Empire will use it. You try to process the implications and fail. Your mind rejects the reality, seeks escape in denial, but denial is impossible when you are living inside the instrument of apocalypse. That night you lie in your bunk, staring at the ceiling centimeters from your face, and you think about desertion. The Death Star has thousands of small craft, shuttles, maintenance pods, escape pods. If you could steal one, if you could somehow evade the fighter patrols and reach hyperspace. But the fantasies collapse under the weight of reality. Your identification chip is embedded in your forearm, broadcasting your location at all times. The hangar bays are guarded by stormtroopers and automated defense systems. Even if you managed to steal a craft and escape, the Empire would hunt down Mira and Sarah and execute them publicly, broadcasting the deaths to every world in the core as a warning against treason. You are trapped as surely as if you were in chains. Word spreads through the maintenance crews. Scarif. Imperial intelligence suffered a major security breach at the Citadel Tower on Scarif, a tropical world housing the Empire's primary data storage facility. Rebel operatives infiltrated the facility and transmitted data off-world before being eliminated. The data included technical readouts of the Death Star, full schematics including structural weaknesses. Imperial Security Bureau agents begin sweeping through the station's crew, interrogating workers, looking for spies and sympathizers. Dozens of beings are arrested on suspicion of collaboration with rebellion, arrested not based on evidence, but on paranoid speculation, on denunciations from co-workers seeking to deflect suspicion from themselves. The arrested are taken to detention blocks and interrogated under torture. Some confess to crimes they did not commit just to make the pain stop. All are executed, their bodies jettisoned into space in a grotesque display meant to discourage further disloyalty. You keep your head down, do your work, speak to no one beyond what is required for your duties. But the fear is constant, a cold weight in your chest, because you know that innocence is no protection. The ISB does not care about guilt or innocence. It cares about compliance and control, and anyone can become a target. Then comes the news that travels through the station like a shockwave. Princess Leia Organa of Alderaan has been captured. Her ship was intercepted attempting to flee Imperial forces at Tatooine, and she is being brought to the Death Star for interrogation. You know the name. Everyone in the galaxy knows the name. Senator Organa's adopted daughter, a prominent voice in the Imperial Senate calling for peace and demilitarization, rumored to have rebel sympathies, though never proven. Her presence on the station means something significant is about to happen, though you do not know what. The answer comes 2 days later when the Death Star arrives in the Alderaan system. You are on shift, performing routine maintenance on an atmospheric scrubber in a corridor on level 357, when the announcement comes over the station-wide comm system. All personnel not directly involved in weapons operations are to remain at their posts during a tactical demonstration. The words are clinical, bureaucratic, but their meaning becomes clear when you access a wall-mounted monitor and see the tactical display. The Death Star is in orbit around Alderaan, a peaceful core world known for its mountains and culture, and 2 billion inhabitants who have never threatened the Empire, who exist under Imperial rule without resistance. You watch in real time as the superlaser charges, energy readings climbing into ranges that make your engineer's mind reel. The focusing dish orients toward the planet below, that beautiful blue and white sphere suspended in the void. And then Grand Moff Tarkin gives the order, his voice transmitted through every speaker on the station. You may fire when ready. The superlaser fires. The beam is visible even from your position deep inside the station, a column of green light that reaches out and touches Alderaan's equator. For a fraction of a second, nothing appears to happen. Then, the planet's crust fractures, cracks spreading across the visible hemisphere like a shattered window, and the surface explodes outward in an expanding sphere of debris and atmosphere. The core ignites, a brief sun that consumes what remains, and within 8 seconds Alderaan is gone, replaced by a field of glowing rubble spreading through space, the fragments of a world and the vaporized remains of 2 billion beings who died, without warning, without chance to flee, without mercy. You stand in the corridor, your hand frozen on the scrubber's maintenance panel, staring at the monitor, and you cannot breathe. Your lungs have forgotten how to pull in air. Your heart is beating too fast, irregular, painful. Around you, other workers have stopped what they were doing, drawn to monitors, their faces reflecting the same horror you feel. Someone is crying, a quiet, hitching sound of grief. Someone else is vomiting, the wet splatter on the deck obscenely loud in the silence. A third worker, a young human male you recognize from your HAB module, pulls a blaster from a toolkit. You do not know where he got it, probably smuggled aboard somehow, and before anyone can react, he places the muzzle under his chin and pulls the trigger. The blast echoes in the corridor, and his body collapses, blood pooling around his head. Stormtroopers arrive within minutes, summoned by sensors that detected the weapon's discharge. They drag the body away and order everyone back to work, their rifles pointed at the maintenance crew, and you comply because what else can you do? But as you return to the scrubber, your hands shaking so badly you can barely hold your tools, you understand with absolute clarity. You are complicit in what just happened. You did not pull the trigger, did not give the order, but you built this weapon, you maintained its systems, you are part of the machinery that just committed genocide on a scale unprecedented in galactic history. The guilt is a physical sensation, acid in your veins, a crushing weight on your chest. That night you do not sleep. You lie in your bunk with your eyes open, seeing Alderaan exploding again and again in your mind. Seeing 2 billion faces you never knew, hearing screams you never heard because they died in the vacuum of space where there is no sound. You think about Sarah, about her dark eyes and her laugh, and you imagine her standing on a planet's surface looking up as a green beam descends from the sky. Imagine her last moment of incomprehension before she is vaporized, and the thought is so unbearable. You have to bite down on your blanket to keep from screaming. In the days that follow, the station's atmosphere changes. Some of the Imperial personnel celebrate the successful test, treating the destruction of Alderaan as a victory, proof that the Death Star works as designed, and that the rebellion will now crumble in the face of such overwhelming power. But many of the conscripted workers are in shock, moving through their shifts like automatons, their eyes hollow. Conversations in the mess halls are muted, fearful. No one dares to speak openly about what happened, but the unspoken horror is a presence in every room, every corridor. You hear through the worker rumor network, information passed in whispers during shift changes, that the Rebel Alliance knows the location of the Death Star's main base, that the plans stolen from Scarif revealed a weakness in the station's design. Thermal exhaust port leading directly to the reactor core. The rumor seems absurd. Why would the Empire's ultimate weapon have such an obvious flaw? But you are an engineer. You understand how complex systems can have cascading failure points, and you wonder if Galen Erso, that haunted broken man, deliberately designed such a weakness as an act of sabotage, a way to sabotage his own terrible creation. The Death Star jumps to hyperspace, destination classified, but the scuttlebutt among the crew suggests the target is the rebel base on Yavin 4, a jungle moon in the Outer Rim. Grand Moff Tarkin intends to use the super laser again, to obliterate the rebellion in a single stroke and demonstrate that resistance to the Empire is not only futile, but fatal. You are on shift when the station emerges from hyperspace in the Yavin system, and within hours, the alert status changes to combat condition. Rebel fighters have launched from the moon. Snub fighters, X-wings and Y-wings, tiny craft barely larger than your work pod. The reaction in the command structure is dismissive. Officers laugh at the audacity of the rebels, comparing the fighter attack to insects attacking a fortress. Over the internal comm, you hear snatches of conversation from the battle stations. They're coming in too fast, and squad leaders, we've picked up a new group of signals, and we count 30 rebel ships, Lord Vader, but they're so small they're evading our turbo lasers, Lord Vader. Darth Vader, the Emperor's enforcer, is on the station, personally commanding the defense. This should reassure the crew, should make victory certain, but you feel only a deepening dread, an animal instinct that something is terribly wrong. The station shudders, impacts from turbo laser fire, as Imperial gunners engage the rebel fighters. Over the comm, they're heading for the polar trench. And later, we've analyzed their attack, sir, and there is a danger. Should I have your ship standing by? Tarkin's voice, cold and supremely confident. Evacuate. In our moment of triumph, I think you overestimate their chances. You are in Sector 357, deep in the guts of the station, performing diagnostics on a life support relay when the alarms begin to wail. Not the combat alert, but something worse. A sound you have never heard before, the shrieking klaxon that indicates catastrophic reactor failure. The automated voice of the station's computer echoes through every speaker. Warning, core breach imminent. All personnel evacuate to designated emergency stations. Repeat, core breach imminent. Core breach. The reactor is going critical. You drop your tools and run, your feet pounding on the deck, joining hundreds of other workers flooding the corridors, all heading toward the evacuation stations, toward the hangar bays and the escape pods. But you are on level 357, buried deep in the station's superstructure, and the nearest hangar is 20 decks above you, a journey that would take 15 minutes at a run if the corridors were empty. But they are not empty. They are packed with panicking beings shoving and trampling each other in their desperation to escape. You reach a turbo lift shaft and find it non-functional, the lifts locked down by emergency protocols. Beings are already climbing the emergency ladder in the shaft, a stream of bodies ascending into the darkness above, and you join them, hauling yourself up rung by rung, your arms burning with effort, your breath coming in ragged gasps. The seconds are counting down in your head, your engineer's knowledge providing the math. A reactor core breach in a station this size will propagate at near light speed once it begins, a chain reaction converting matter into energy. And when it reaches the main reactor, the entire Death Star will be vaporized in a blast that will briefly outshine Yavin's star. You climb 10 levels, your hands slipping on the rungs, your legs trembling with exhaustion, and above you someone loses their grip and falls, their body tumbling past you with a scream that Dopplering away into the depths below. 20 levels. Your lungs are on fire, each breath a knife in your chest. 30 levels. You can see light above, the opening to a hangar deck, and you push yourself harder, climbing faster because maybe, just maybe, you can reach an escape pod in time. You pull yourself out of the shaft onto the hangar deck and are met with chaos. Thousands of beings are here, crew and workers and officers, all fighting to get to the few remaining escape pods and shuttles. Stormtroopers are firing into the crowd, blaster bolts cutting down panicking civilians to clear a path for Imperial officers who push past the bodies to commandeer the last ships. You see a Lambda-class shuttle's ramp closing as beings claw at it, trying to force their way aboard, and the shuttle lifts off, its repulsors blasting those below it into the deck with lethal force. You run toward an escape pod cluster, one of dozens of small capsules designed to hold 6 beings each, and you see it is already full, beings packed inside like cargo. You grab the hatch to pull yourself in anyway, and someone inside kicks you in the face, their boot connecting with your nose, and you feel cartilage crunch, blood exploding hot and wet down your face. You fall back, and the escape pod launches, its rockets firing, and you watch it streak away through the hangar's atmospheric shield into space. There are no more pods within reach. The shuttles are gone. The hangar is emptying of ships, and the station is shaking now, violent tremors that knock beings off their feet, the reactor's death throes transmitted through the superstructure. You understand, you're not getting off the Death Star. This is where you die. You sit down on the deck, your back against a bulkhead, your nose bleeding, your hands shaking. Around you, other beings are realizing the same thing, that they are out of time, out of options, that death is seconds away. Some are praying to gods you do not know. Some are sobbing. Some are simply sitting in silence, waiting for the end. You think of Mira and Sarah. You hope they are safe. You hope the Empire does not punish them for your death. You hope Sarah grows up strong and brave and that she never knows the full horror of what you helped create. You close your eyes and you think about sunlight on Corellia, about your daughter's laugh, about the feeling of holding your wife's hand, and you hold on to those memories as tightly as you can, because in a few seconds they will be all that remains of you. The reactor core breaches. The chain reaction begins in the heart of the Death Star, matter converting to energy in a runaway cascade, and the destruction propagates outward at a significant fraction of light speed. Your sector is vaporized in a fraction of a second, the heat so intense that your body does not burn or explode. It simply transitions from solid matter to plasma in a transformation so fast that your nervous system does not have time to register. Pain. You are there, and then you are not, your consciousness extinguished between one microsecond and the next. No time for fear or regret, just instant non-existence. The Death Star explodes, a sphere of energy expanding to consume the entire battle station, all 160 kilometers of it, converting 1 trillion tons of durasteel and machinery and flesh into an expanding sphere of debris and radiation. 2 million beings die instantly. Imperial crew, conscripted workers, prisoners, droids, all obliterated in the blast. The shockwave is visible from Yavin 4's surface, a new star blooming in the sky that fades to a debris field spreading through space, the shattered fragments of the Empire's ultimate weapon. Your death changes nothing. The Empire will build another Death Star, larger and more powerful. The cycle of oppression and violence will continue. But in your last moments in that hangar bay waiting for the end, you are more than a number, more than a conscripted laborer, more than a cog in the Imperial machine. You were Jaren Cross, a being who loved his family, who tried to survive impossible circumstances, who bore witness to atrocity and suffered for it. Your story is one of millions, all equally tragic, all equally forgotten by a galaxy that builds monuments to power and buries the bones of its laborers in unmarked graves. On Corellia, Mira and Sarah receive official notification 3 weeks later that you died in service to the Empire, killed in a rebel attack on an Imperial facility. They do not know about the Death Star, do not know about Alderaan, do not know the truth of what you helped build or how you died. They mourn you as a husband and father taken too soon, and they try to rebuild their lives in a galaxy that will continue to chew up beings and spit out corpses for years to come. The dark side of working on the Death Star was not the danger or the hardship or even the death. It was the forced complicity in evil, the transformation of ordinary beings into accomplices to genocide, the theft of choice and morality and humanity in service to a machine of oppression. And that darkness does not end with the Death Star's destruction. It persists in every weapon of war, every instrument of tyranny, every system that uses beings as tools and discards them when they are no longer useful. Your story is over, but the galaxy's capacity for horror continues endlessly, a cycle as inexorable as the orbit of stars.